You know, when we talk about interaction design, often a lot of people like go into their pocket and pull out a phone or some sort of device or any device they have on them. But I think without humans, there's nothing interesting to talk about.
I think we specialize with devices that have a screen because they're nearly ubiquitous now. The most common one actually is the mobile phone. We went from 0 in the late 80s to over 5 billion earlier this year. So that's the biggest shift that ever happened.
Interaction design really implies that what we design as a man-made objects is only complete when there are people who are using it.
We are tool makers. If you use a stick to reach for a high fruit, you're using a tool to augment your reach. And likewise, every piece of consumer electronics that we've made, every piece of software that we've made, every service that we use, right? These are all augmentations of our abilities as humans. And when the augmentation really works, then that extension of yourself feels natural and beautiful and does what you want and doesn't get in the way.
Unfortunately, a number of technological products that we sort of use, they require our constant attention and they have these sort of annoying beeps and they sort of ask for our attention all the time. So something that can do its own thing, disappearing in the background is great.
I do feel that as of now, we are in the phase where we are a little bit confused of what's really important in life. I'm right here with you and I start to look at the screen. My phone is silent, but there are millions of things that I can do while I'm with you. But am I then really with you?
It's really important to look at what the consequences are of putting these products into the world. When we think about things like the phone, it's just a piece of plastic and metal. You know, the way it's changed our behavior, it can be enabling and also disrupting. For these things to change our lives for the better or enable us to do things we couldn't do before, they have to be done in a way that feels natural and feels like a conversation.
The use of voice and the use of natural gestures. I think Connect was really, quite wonderful in this respect. You get rid of the wand in the same way that the iPhone got rid of the physical buttons. You're removing the extraneous, you're removing the artificial.
Everything that you touch on a screen feels glossy. It's all the same. It's touching glass. And we often try to imbue texture into that and make it feel like something else. When we start to use haptics, they give physical vibrotactile feedback. We can start to feel the difference in different kinds of touches and get to give different kinds of feedback. And then we can complete that visual metaphor with tactile feedback as well.
I think everybody is a little too fascinated with making interfaces that look like they can be touched. I find it kind of ironic that we're trying to make digital things look a little too real. See how long that lasts.
Analog can be wonderful. What's not wonderful is fake analog.
It's a little tragic how everyone is trying to translate print onto digital format. What we will see at some point is for someone to take the medium and do something that's appropriate and magical and enhances the experience.
And what interaction design really does is make those experiences natural and make them much more about the content or the experience or what we're trying to do and less about using a device, using a screen, using an application.
Let's make it about the content, not about the Chrome, as they call it. Chrome is devoid of meaning, aside from just a signal of what metaphor is being used. And every time you see it after that, it's just noise. Whereas the content is always real. Pictures, movies, stories, these things will never go out of style. So bridging that somehow, right, making use of the knowledge, the latent knowledge and the metaphor without imitating it, I think is the sweet spot.
We're brought sort of discrete projects that are sold and closed in a box, and we deliver them, and then they get built and put out into the world. And the reality is most things are really living systems, living documents. They go on and they almost immediately change. How you actually design and enact a living system within UX is something that's quite challenging. For example, you actually need to think more about patterns of desired outcomes and behaviors you want to achieve rather than just, simply moving a user through one flow in an experience.
You give up a lot of the control, the luxury you had back in the day, where it was one user, one task, one computer. It's all gone now. It's much more like you are setting a stage, really, for other people to perform, but you can never tell them what to do. And you can perhaps make your interventions by changing the playing field a bit or throwing in some new props, but you have to perform surgery on the live patient, so to speak, while you have millions and millions of users registered.
We can't have this attitude anymore that a map is going to come out once a year, or that we have to wait for South Sudan to be recognized formally by the UN before it shows up on the map. It's there's this idea that the map is this living thing that's being made of everything that we've got. The idea that it's different in the morning than it was in the evening is a really good way to stay connected to the idea that the world is changing.
I think that's the beauty and the biggest challenge of interaction design, that you cannot necessarily foresee the consequences when people adopt what you have designed to see something completely different than what you have created. It's like throwing a stone in the water and you don't know what it will cause.
Interaction design 5 or 6 years ago meant solving and thinking through kind of choreography of information and feedback and interfaces around a product. But the big step was going from thinking about it as being contained in each of those things to now thinking about it as something that exists across them.
It's understanding that ecosystem where the human is at the center and understanding that network of things and how they all work together rather than your device or your thing being at the center.
The technology that I work on and the stuff that I do is about to permeate a whole different field that is not tech per se. That'll be cool. And if it can have a really good impact there, if it can change the way your house is being done.
I think the next big thing, we're talking 5 or 7 years out here, would be what is now called the Internet of Things, which is essentially about connecting all kinds of things and stuff that currently is not connected digitally, and working a lot more with sensors and things to basically get more of the physical world connected with the digital world.
That's what the future lies in store for us, is there'll be software in everything. In books, not just an iPad, but in books. Your packaging for your food that talks to your refrigerator, lets your refrigerator know what you're eating.
Clothing, when we start embedding these things into our products, then we're not talking about pressing buttons on screens, but we're talking about our everyday objects and fabrics responding to the way we behave.
A lot of the things that we interact with, like a simple and stupid light switch, becomes a piece of intelligent technology that communicates with other objects. And in a way, when I press this button, I might not get the same result depending on the situation or the day of the week or the time. So in a way, the environment becomes a little bit more intelligent, but not with like a centralized intelligence, but like smaller units talking to each other.
The transitions between being in your car to outside of your car to back in your car being a lot more seamless, things being done in the background that allows you to just focus your attention on driving and not necessarily on like changing the radio or like answering your call.
The more we equipped all the products and objects in our lives with these sensors, and the more that they're able to sort of talk back to us and have conversations, we want to make sure that those feel natural. What I'm looking to do, or the kind of information I need when I'm at home, is different from when I'm on the go, is different from when I'm at work, or say in a public space. So what we're going to see is our products and services starting to learn where we go and anticipate our needs and how we want to digest information and what we're looking to do in each of those places.
Using embedded devices, embedded technologies more broadly in our environment, not just in the home, but moving into cities, streets, buildings, et cetera, as a way to broadcast and communicate data to the network and create sort of a mesh-like network that lays over a city or one's experience, not just between their mobile device and their tablet and their home, but really, in real time across everything.
So this whole idea of collecting a lot more data and then presenting it not as a listing or a spreadsheet, but much more subtly, something that is meaningful to you from the corner of your eye. So imagine that you could see on the street, you could see literally the footsteps of your friends, like where they went an hour ago, or perhaps slightly more abstracted, so you get this blue kind of buzz over this block, and you get the sense that that's probably a good place to go, because some of my friends seem to be there.
Natural processing of visual information, it's getting better and better every year. And of course, expressions on faces and emotional content. I mean, there's the big category recognition one, the one that is able to look at a photo and annotate and say, this is a paper cup, and this is a chair, and this is a light, and this is a camera. That'll be very, very enabling.
And the thing that I think is very interesting that's about to happen is that people are entering status messages, or they're talking to each other, or they're noting things, or they're pointing to articles or occurrences on the web. Or if, in the case of like the earthquake in Japan, they're asking for help and they're being found. So when you type in a message, or when you type in a status, or when you post a photo, in essence, it's becoming digital. You could take all those pieces and you can design all kinds of amazing things around it, because it's not just about photos being digital or music being digital. People are now actually entering their lives, what's going on around them, into a digital format. And so we'll be able to start to do things with that in the future that I think are going to be very exciting.
Interaction design is at a pretty interesting inflection point right now. A lot of the models and a lot of the ideas and a lot of the principles are in place. And a lot of the hard work today is not just commercializing them so that we can rent a movie or that we can hold up our phone and find out what music is playing in a bar. We're figuring out how to drive them to more and more mundane, meaningful parts of our lives. Things like energy. It's a fascinating field that interaction design, I think, is starting to really penetrate. You can't really rearrange the grid that easily. You can't really move buildings and apartments and subway stations around, but you can build a shared layer on top of it through behavior and through the right contextual information that can really shift the way we use those resources.
It's also going into the medical industry. Wearable devices to track your heart rates and activity you do. All that kind of stuff I think is really, really exciting and amazing.
Moving healthcare from a place of being this one-time visit with a doctor where you simply go in only when you feel sick or you sort of have an ailment, to this perpetual ongoing thing and this ongoing conversation in a very lightweight way.
You might be able to help frontline health workers, people who don't have a great deal of training. Why couldn't you take a picture of it, take a sample of it, and have the rest of the complexity of that all hidden, but that immediate piece of information when you need it? But the network is sampling the world and knowing what's cropping up where and able to match and find patterns and anticipate outbreaks of diseases. We're not just trying to sort of take those disruptive technologies I was talking about and push them out to the periphery. We're trying to now collect out of the periphery a much richer set of what's going on in the world so that we can learn as a society and optimize and evolve the right systems and services.
All over the world, things are changing at a speed that is both terrifying and exhilarating. I think one of the exciting things about the design industry and the creative process is that they can help. And I think what we need is for designers who can be embedded in the topics that are really, really important right now, and for there to be a better synergy between design and business design and social change design and entrepreneurship. They can't solve them on their own, but they can certainly help us to come up with more creative solutions.
That's the next big, exciting, fun thing, I think, and have a huge positive impact on that, on people's lives.
One of the things that I think emerges as a byproduct of all of this intensive connectivity is there's a superorganism building up in which humans are no longer at the top of the food chain in some way.
This whole idea that we would all actually be connected, like it's actually happening. And I think maybe it's more fair to say that it already has happened. And we're kind of like still acting in some ways like everybody's not connected.
We live in a world where access to Facebook can determine the fate of a government. We're in a world where that human layer is so critical. And so I think you're starting to see this kind of new layer where there's this powerful kind of secondary effect, an emergent power that is purely delivered by good interactions, good interfaces, good ways of connecting people.